Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It's been a while, but I am so happy to be back. And what a treat for guest number 200. We have, of course, the great Professor Peter Van Toor, a real expert in Partimento, that subject which I'm so in love with and so inspired by and influenced by in my own life. And it's really a thrill. We have some really interesting things, and he's going to mention some wonderful new releases that are out. And I'm really looking forward to it. Peter, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much, Nicol. It's great to be back on the show.
So let's get into it. Zingarelli, that's the first name on the list. So, from what people know, I mean, from his history, he was, I guess, the head of one of the conservatories, and he was kind of a person leading into the 19th century. And I think he worked with Bellini, perhaps, and so can you, what you have a new beautiful edition out, right, of Zingarelli? Why don't you just introduce the person and here's a picture of the book here.
Yeah, so many of these editions they are kind of born from my own teaching because I need materials to work with, and the Zingarelli books are really wonderful. It's just that the Ricordi editions that came out in print in the 1830s, and which I'm happy to have a copy of. But there are so many mistakes in them, so I really wanted to do to go through everything, not only from the printed source, but also from the manuscripts, and to see which manuscripts do we have, and what do they tell us about all these mistakes.
What mistakes are there?
Well, there are many mistakes. The quality of the transcription that was made by Ricordi in the 1830s is just not good. Um, for example, I mean, Zingarelli had a terrible handwriting. he I mean, I have problems to read it too, but if you train yourself a little bit, you see when there is a 5, or when there is a 3, or when there is a natural, yeah, or in the Ricordi edition they even mix up like the sign for trillo, so the TR sign with a sharp, for example, and that gets very crazy. You understand immediately. Oh, that cannot be right. So some things are very obvious, but there are also many mistakes that are not so obvious, and that you really need to look carefully into the earliest manuscripts to detect.
Right. Do you think it was precisely because and who is Ricordi? I mean, how influential was he as a publisher in Italy?
Yeah, well, he was very important, and I mean they still are important, the Ricordi editions. But the quality of these early editions are generally not very good.
Hmm.
They're much better today, I can say.
um, why did you have to look at manuscripts to and would they did have manuscripts? Were they sent to the publisher? Is that what it was, or was it part of the conservatory?
Yeah, so Zingarelli had the opportunity to print 2 volumes of um, solfeggi in 1833. So he was in contact with Ricordi. There are no letters preserved from this correspondence, but he must have been in contact with them. He was still alive, and they were printing his stuff. And probably in these communications between Ricordi and Zingarelli, they came up with the idea to also um, print his partimenti. So those came out, first volume in 1834, and the second volume in 1835. So very shortly after the production of the solfeggi.
Who was he the student of?
Yeah, he was a student. He had two important teachers. The most important one was, of course, Fedele Fenaroli. You can see that in his materials. He owes a lot regarding the construction of his Partimenti curriculum to Fenaroli. But he had also Alessandro Speranza as a teacher, as a private teacher, and both were Durante. I belong to the Durante lineage.
So in his Partimenti, how does it compare to the Fenaroli edition? I mean, to the Fenaroli Partimenti. What is new? Is there anything new because he's younger? Are there any innovations that are new? Any choices of harmony? Um, what's different?
Yeah, there are several things that are striking in these editions. The first thing that is, I think, remarkable is that if you look at the Zingarelli books, um, there are quite a lot of Partimento fugues, and these Partimento fugues are, if you wouldn't know who wrote them, you would almost think that they were from the Leo tradition. So he was kind of trying to create a synthesis between the two schools. This was, of course, in the maybe late 1810s. He started with these materials, and this continued in the 1820s and early 1830s. But he was clearly interested to link together these two schools, where there was quite a lot of friction between these schools. I mean, they had merged together, and they had to cope with these different traditions of learning counterpoint. And it was probably, he saw it probably as his task to create a curriculum that suited all students, regardless if they were going into the direction of church music or if they would like to commence in the opera.
So there's 3 volumes here in your edition. And how many are there? Are they comprehensive like Fenaroli? Because Fenaroli goes from, I guess you could say, upper, beginner, intermediate, all the way to Partimento fugues. What's the scope of difficulty and the pedagogical uh, use that you see here for this collection?
Yeah, so one of the things that was very surprising when I started to go through all these manuscripts was that um, I found no copies of the second book of Partimenti that predated the printed edition of the Ricordi edition. Okay, so all the manuscripts that are before 1834, they all cover the first book of Partimenti and not the second one, which means that Zingarelli probably was teaching, or at least it seems that he was teaching mostly from book one, and book two maybe he even wrote it after his communications with Ricordi. So can we do another book? I mean, that's the impression we get, right? So yes, and another thing is that um, in several of these manuscripts we find Zingarelli's comments and his handwriting and corrections. So a student who has written some mistakes in his transcription, then Zingarelli is in there with his pencil and corrects it, right? So this is all very intriguing to see the materials where Zingarelli himself was in contact with these manuscripts. And this is particularly interesting because we don't have the autographs that were sent to to Ricordi. So those have not survived. So the manuscripts from the students of Zingarelli, where Zingarelli's handwriting is preserved, are of course of particular interest for this edition.
How much work was this to do this investigative work and to compile things and to cross check things and to do you see a lot of consistency or do you see strange things?
Yeah, you need to check in different manuscripts. So it's, I mean, the transcription, if you once you have picked what source you would like to follow, then the process of transcribing goes rather quickly. But the work before you choose is quite extensive, because you have to collect the stuff, and sometimes you have to order digitizations and compare these editions. So the preparatory work is quite extensive. And then, of course, when you have made the transcription, then you have lots of questions while you're sitting and playing it. Can this really be correct? Then you have to look at another one and another one, and the final proofreading. I go through various manuscripts to see the discrepancies between the sources and to make up my mind how to deal with it.
Would you like to maybe take a partimenti, like like anyone you want, and and kind of just demonstrate a little bit of the taste of Zingarelli, so
Yeah,
we have an idea of what he is like?
absolutely. We could look at one of the first book, um, just to show. I don't know if you can see this. Is this
Yes,
too?
it's perfect. Yeah, it comes out well.
Okay, so
I noticed you were doing, was that three voices? Uh, so you're not doing chords, right? You're doing melodic counterpoint.
yeah. Well, you can do 4-part as well. This is rather late, so I think it works well to do 4-part
Mm.
harmony too. But many of these work very well in 3-part style too.
And that's something you encourage, right? I think when you're working with, at least beginning with students, do you like to just go melodically first?
Yeah, when I start teaching Partimento, I usually start with the Durante Volume 1,
Hmm.
and to do all the cadences in 3 parts, and then go to the scales and then the sequences, all in 3 parts, with all the variation stuff, and flipping voices and in different keys, and etc. etc. And from there, I move on to Stanislao Mattei, the piccolibassi, that are rather short, that are easy to memorize, and that's also done in 3-part style. So Zingarelli comes after that, I would say, because um, at some point you get the feeling that you learn so many like contrapuntal patterns, and these patterns are combined in various ways, but it's melodically not always so very interesting. Yeah, and Zingarelli is really the guy to go to learn melodic invention. He really encourages to create good melodies.
How do you mean that? Why do you say that?
Yeah, well, you sense in the partimenti that the music is phrased. You hear the phrases. You see the four bars, 4-bar structures, or sometimes 2 + 2 + 4, and you really need to create melodies that reflect what you see in the bass, right? So, and this is something that is essential for any player also to master, to learn good melody, and also to learn like to to um, to practice how you form things. And the impulses you get from the bass, you need to do something with that in the melodies, which also means that the middle voices are maybe less interesting than the outer voices in Zingarelli, because the outer voices they um, they are kind of prioritized compared with earlier counterpoint where they are more equal. So that's it's an interesting also to see the difference between the like Durante in the 1750s or 40s and then Zingarelli in the 1820s. It's quite a big difference.
Is that is was he the same conservatory as Fenaroli? Did he take over? I know there was a consolidation that happened, right?
Yeah. So um,
So what my
Zingarelli,
question would be was were the teaching materials of Fenaroli and Furno, are they somewhat preserved, or is he doing something of his own?
you mean Zingarelli or Furno?
Zingarelli, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Zingarelli, he returned from various fantastic appointments, first in Milano and after that in Rome. And when he returned to Naples, this merging of the various schools had already taken place. So there was only one conservatory left, and that also received a new name. So to get a kind of neutral um, name for the new institution. So the new name was Real Conservatorio, so the Royal Conservatory of Naples. And yeah, there he was in charge of the composition lessons, of course, the counterpoint and composition, and he was teaching um, like opera style.
Mm.
Recitatives and arias and so on. But he also taught a lot of singing. So the amount of the number of solfeggi by that are still preserved in autographs by Zingarelli is stunningly big. It's like I think between 600 and 700 pieces.
Wow, just Zingarelli?
Yeah, and all in autograph. Yeah, so the autograph
Wait,
material
wow.
is really really big.
Where are these so are these like on how do people can people access them?
Well, they are. I think maybe 80% of them are in Naples, and
Mm.
maybe 20% of them are in Milano.
Okay. Okay.
So those two conservatory libraries are the places where they are preserved.
I see just I mean on IMSLP there's a few little bit of like 26 solfeggi here, solfeggi per soprano. Oh,
Yeah.
150 vocalises. Is that's not a vocalise is not really a solfeggio, is it?
Um, right. I think yeah, those are the Paris volumes that you
Okay.
see here. But
Okay.
also on IMSLP, you can also find the Ricordi editions. Actually,
Okay. I
I
wonder
don't
where
know
they
which
are.
one it is, but
Okay. All right, I'll have to
yeah,
if we can find it, yeah, we
I
can
think it's
share
the
it.
solfeggio per soprano under the S that you
Oh,
have.
okay. Yeah, 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 I see that. Oh, wow, there's a lot. Well,
Yeah,
at
so
least
you have
three
volume
books.
one and the volume two.
Wow. Okay, so now these are these useful for teachers like to for sample melodies? Like can you
Absolutely.
what I mean
Uh,
is can you transplant a solfeggi melody onto a partimento bass as an exemplar for your students?
yeah, I think it helps a lot to sing all these pieces. I mean, you get a lot of ideas on how melodies are shaped and how form it works and how how the melody behaves in cadences, and also the sequences. What do you do with a melody in that kind of sequence? What do you do with a melody in that kind of sequence?
Yeah.
So absolutely, you can learn a lot from the solfeggi.
So, Peter, how do you teach? If you were to use Zingarelli,
Yeah,
how would you build up? Oh, I see these have bases as well.
yeah,
Okay, wow, these are nice. So, how would you teach? Maybe to if we go back to your screen,
yeah,
like maybe you could just take as an example for one of those partimenti on the screen, like maybe one of the anyone you want, like how would you conduct a lesson just like for maybe a few minutes, like if you're working with somebody, can you describe like the back and forth, your discussion with the student and the playing, what you would prompt them to do? How would because I'm sure a lot of teachers would be really interested to know your teaching method.
yeah. So in the beginning, I think it's important to start with the basic materials. So I find that the Durante school and the setup of the Durante school um, better to use in the beginning than what you see in the Leo school. The easiest pieces in the Leo school are often very difficult for modern players, and because they start with double counterpoint right away,
Mm.
and if you haven't had the extensive training of having sung like lots of Leo solfeggi and if you already have learned a lot about double counterpoint in the singing lessons, then it's very difficult to start with these Leo pieces. So I think for modern users, Durante is more accessible
Mm.
and easier to start with. So what I usually do is I create sound files. So I make recordings of the cadences, and I make a lot of variations on every cadence. So if you get a new cadence in
Three voices.
three voices, yes,
Okay.
and those elements they you get them back. I mean, the cadences you have them in every piece, regardless if it's a small one or a big one. There are always cadences. So it's very smart to start with that. Yeah. And so after a while, when you've done a lot of like three-part writing in the beginning for modern plays, I mean, we are accustomed to think in outer parts. I mean, that's what popular music does a lot of the time, and you think in chords. So for modern players, the best way to start is to break that verticality and to start working on lines. So maybe the first year or so, I think the linear way of listening and the linear way of playing and the evaluation of everything you play from a linear perspective is is really very good, very helpful. And when you've done that and you have learned all these elements, then you need to put them together in phrases, in small phrases.
Oh, you just do cadences, just a cadence. That's it.
Yeah, just a
No,
case,
no partimenti, just working with cadences.
not
One
in the
five
beginning.
one, 1 3 4 5. Just the baseline.
Yeah, so pom 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 like that, and you get 10 different versions of a cadence, and I mix them up in different keys, and I flip the voices, and I do a lot of variations with just one cadential pattern, and that's exactly what the Neapolitans did. They varied and varied and varied, and so and this is also typical for improvisatory methods, because if you have a lot of exercises with the same length, right, then you can exchange the solutions between them exactly as you learn in jazz. Yeah, in jazz, if you have a 2-5-1 pattern and you learn a lot of licks over a 2-5-1, then you can exchange them and you can reuse things. Yeah, and when you get to a piece and you see a 2-5-1, then you all of a sudden have like 20 different options to choose from. That's how you get the improvisation going, and it's exactly the same as Durante does with his cadential formulas. So you learn to vary and to improvise, to become a little bit free.
So then you do short ones like Mattei. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So then come the
That's a
free.
good. I think that's a good segue. I think to your the Mattei edition. I think maybe we could talk about that.
Yeah. So I could show. Um, um, I mean, we could start to just take a look at some of these the piccolibassi, the small ones, because that's what comes next after the cadences, scales, sequences, right? So if I would choose one, for example, um, let's take E flat major, this one. So if we look at the number 38, yeah, then you see something like that. I have to move on a little bit. Like that. So just to create good lines over a notated bass line, to make a good, to learn to listen to the middle voice and to concentrate on the middle voice. Maybe sometimes also singing the middle voice, adding your voice to the middle voice while you are playing, and to get this linear way of thinking. Yeah, and it's very fascinating to see how Mattei then reuses those kind of materials in the ripieni. If you see, this is a little bit from the forward of the new edition.
One
With the
second, Peter.
yeah,
What's a ripieni?
yeah, ripieni is well, we could call it the partimento also, but it's a piece that is slightly longer, a prelude you could call it. Yeah. So here you see the piccoli bass, the small bass, number 9 and number 44. And number 9 goes like this. Like that. And the number 44 does something that's also characteristic. And if you look at the ripieni, what he does, so here starts elements from the number 44. So you really see that he reuses elements that the students already have learned to play, maybe in different keys, but they get it back and they recognize it, and they have to create a piece and see, okay, why do I use this element here? Is this a transition, or is it a theme, or how do I use it? So it's also, you see that in these pieces that there is a reflection going on about how pieces are composed. Yeah, in the piccolibassi, it's mostly like imitating and making variations and getting the skills to just work out something contrapuntally in a proper way. But in the ripieni, it's much more extensive because the pieces grow in scope, and and the theme reappears in new keys. So you can also like analyze the piece in sections, and then you see also like transitions between the first theme and when the theme gets back in the dominant key, for example, what happens in between. And from these ideas, you learn how to do similar things yourself. If you have a versetto, a little piece of maybe just one phrase, can you turn this one little phrase into a piece of 4 or 5 minutes? How do you do that? So that's a very interesting question. So how can you turn a little idea into a larger, like, free composition, or free? It's still connected to an idea, but I mean, you can use any idea and turn it into a larger piece if you have a harmonic trajectory and you have some basic ideas for how to modulate. So I imagine that these are also exercises in learning how to set up a piece from an idea that you maybe have learned to play.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. The first one is regarding keys and modulations. Peter, do you ever see keys with five sharps, six flats, seven flats, seven sharps? Is this a common thing? Should students and teachers focus on a certain number of keys, or do you think it's a good idea to do a cadence in, oh my goodness, 24 keys, 30 keys, and harmonic keys? What do you say about key practice? And I noticed that, for instance, in Martini, he would give the same short partimento but in different keys. And is that to train just being good in different keys?
Yeah, very good question. It's a difficult one because if you start with too high an ambition, if you say, okay, you need to do everything in all the keys, it can be very tiring for students. I mean, just to learn the rule of the octave in all keys, is that really necessary? Or all the cadences, like in C sharp minor and D sharp major, all that kind of crazy, I mean, keys that are not used so very often. I tend to follow the manuscripts. So if you see how Durante behaves with this, he uses all the white keys. So there is some ambition to learn to play in the most important keys, but he doesn't do all the keys. So it's not like vol temperite clavi, you have to do all
Hmm.
24 keys in minor and major, but rather, so C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B minor. That's enough in the beginning. That's enough.
you know,
Uh,
uh, Peter, I asked this to, I think it was, it was Nicola Canzano, and it was just, I
yeah,
think also, isn't it true that, the harp, the way the harpsichord is tuned and everything, it's, if you go too far out, it's just going to ruin everything, right?
yeah. I agree with that. And the further you get in time, so in chronology, if you look at what Mattei does, he uses all keys. He
Hmm.
goes through all of them. But that is then the 18, no, that is maybe 17, almost 1790,
Mm.
right? So that's 40 years later. And things have happened there with the tuning systems and so on. So it becomes more, I
Equal.
mean, yeah. So
Okay.
it, it it's expected of a method to use all the keys in the very late 18th century.
Yeah, I understand what you were saying about fatigue. It can be too much, and also when you're doing that, you don't you wouldn't it be better to learn like 10 things in one key
Yeah,
and or at least three or four keys than
yeah, so
just you're just doing one thing in 24 keys.
yeah,
You're gonna go first of all, you're gonna go crazy. That's the first thing because it's the same thing and then it's a lot of work. I mean, not to say that you should never eventually get them all done, but for a student, I think
yeah,
you're saying it's more practical to just get a few more variations in first.
yeah, and the variations are much more important than the number of keys. Yeah, so learning the patterns and becoming a little bit free, so you have not one pattern. So it would be worse to like play a C major cadence in block chords and then do it in all keys. Then that's not what's intended.
Oh,
You really
that's
should do
fatiguing.
it should really be counterpoint and learning all these contrapuntal variations. That's what's at stake.
Yeah.
So that's far more important than learning all the keys.
I noticed in jazz as well when a lot of musicians play the blues in F, and
Yeah,
and the I got rhythm changes in B flat, and those are almost like fixed. So in a sense, like you just get it well done in F first before we. And I remember an anecdote with Bud Powell that somebody was complaining he's playing so much in F. This is so, and he was a fabulous improviser.
yeah,
Um, I mean, it is a significant amount of work to take your vocabulary and then just do the same thing in another key and in another key and another key before you get all the keys. Of course, we all work towards that, but
yeah,
I'm very interested in pedagogical efficiency. I think really
yeah.
what I'm interested in.
Another thing regarding modulation and the need to learn to transpose. One thing that you can learn from the Bolognese tradition, you see that in Mattei, but also in several of Mattei's students, for example, Luigi Palmerini, that they use um, um, a little versetto, and then they put a secondary dominant at the end towards the parallel key, and then nothing more. So they say, good luck. Now you should play it in minor. And so just remember what you played, and you do it in minor.
Hmm.
And if they have a piece in minor, then they put a secondary dominant to the major parallel, and they say, "Good luck, play it in major." Just do it. Yeah, which means that learning to transpose by ear was something they did not with all 24 keys, but preferably with a parallel key.
Yes.
That's enough. You learn to play by ear. That's very
I
good.
have a fundamental base question for you, and it's undeniable that I guess, especially in the 19th century, it's really everyone, Beethoven, everyone is thinking this way. It's just a historical development. So certain things like the second scale degree, the fourth, the fifth, the seventh scale degree, some would say that's just the dominant chord, and I don't need to think too much. If I look at the first scale degree and the third scale degree, that's the tonics, harmony. Do you do that at all? I mean, do you think that way? Is that a is like a do you use that as a shorthand ever, or are you trying your best to always be, in a sense, the traditional thinking in terms of thinking in terms of horizontal? The third scale degree is quite different from the first scale degree in conception. Can you answer this question, Peter? What do you think about this?
Do you mean from the melody or from the bass?
Let's say from from the base.
From the
Or
bass.
and also what it implies for the what you create.
Yeah. Yeah, of course it depends on whether you work with figures or whether you work with unfigured bass. If there are no figures, then you need to rely on the rule of the scale or the rule of the octave, right? So there you have the scale degrees that have certain characteristics, um, and those are often learned first with figures, and then you have to remember them in any key So in the ascending scale have certain characteristics, and the descending scale have other characteristics. But if you think from the melody, then it's another question. Then maybe you have a melody that is given by the teacher, and then you're supposed to make a bass to it. There you, of course, you rely on your memory and the sense of style that you have received. Often these melodies that were given to the students, they contain like small elements of imitation. So you have to recognize these small elements. Here I could do a little imitation, or you have points of cadences where you have to recognize, this is probably that thing in the bass that is expected. And then you if you can make the bass like to move stepwise, it's often better than to jump a lot. And so it's there's a lot of intuition going on, and often I think that for us today the difficult thing is to learn how to read these things. That's the analytical reading. What are you seeing here? Can you tell me what you see? So what are you reacting upon? To learn to see the signals that you are supposed to react upon. So often in my teaching, I use a lot of like talking. So tell me what you see and what you think is important here. What are the main things and what is less important?
You're trying to get the student to like can you see this in the score? Can you see what's happening
Can you
basically?
see
Are
what's
you
happening? Yes. Yeah.
and it should be clear. Like if you see an accidental in the bass, there's a key change. These things have to shout out to you in a way. In a way,
Yeah.
you have to be
Yeah.
quick at seeing them.
Yeah. Can you recognize a sequential pattern even if it's disguised? Sometimes they disguise it. And you have to look like after four notes, you see the next one in the sequence. After 4 notes, you see the next one. So, this is clearly a sequence, but it's not obvious from the beginning. So it's a training. You have to train that skill to learn to see that, and that it has consequences for how you play and how you realize the stuff.
That's great. So there's one more thing I would like to talk about. Is there anything else about Mattei that we missed? Do you think? Did we cover Mattei? Is there everything
Just
else?
one thing about I just mentioned Palmerini.
Yeah.
Palmerini was an interesting guy. I put this in the foreword of this new edition, and I wanted to show this. So Palmerini, he gives a little instruction in his Partimento curriculum, where he says, okay, if you have learned the versetto, if you take a piccolibassi of 5 or 6 measures, play the theme which is proposed in the keys of one's choice. So if you have a little piece in D major, for example, then you just play the piece. And then modulate to the 5th scale degree, please. So in the way you like. So you have to, you can't do that in the same way every time, but you have to have a few different ways to get to the dominant key. And then you remember what you played in the main key and just try to play it in the dominant key. So you have to modulate it by ear. And then after that, you modulate to the 3rd scale degree. So from the 5th scale degree to the 3rd scale degree. And then you have to again remember what you played, but now in minor. Right?
So if we were in C initially, this would be the key of E minor.
Yeah, that would be E minor then.
Hmm.
And then you modulate again to the 6th scale degree, also a minor key.
Mm-hmm.
And then you modulate from the 6th scale degree to the 4th scale degree. and then you return to the main key, in which the subject of this bass or prelude started. If the theme is of an imitative nature, one can make a small coda with a pedal note on the fifth scale degree, and thus end the composition in the key in which the composition started. Right? So if you imagine that you were an organist and you had a little idea, then this is the recipe to create a piece of 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And now, when you know this, you also understand why, in the original manuscripts, why Mattei has a section of modulations after these piccolibassi, because that's the next step.
Mm.
You should find all these different ways from 1 to 5, or from 5 to 3, or from 3 to 6. Huh? Not one way, but maybe 5 or 6 or 7 different ways to get there. And then you can start experimenting with a little versetto, and then you try to create your own modulations instead of following a partimento all the time. So it's like kind of reconstructing the compositional process that you find in the ripieni. And that's really fascinating. So you can see a partimento as a piece that have to be played, okay, and you have to become skilled to do that. But you can also see it as a model for free improvisation. If you see, okay, here are the impulses, this is the theme, this is the trajectory. Now let's switch the theme. I take another theme. Can I still use the same trajectory? Or can I still use the same modulations, but exchange the theme? Or could I do it otherwise? Could I still preserve the same themes, but exchange the modulations? I
Peter,
don't.
when you say themes, are you referring to your melodic idea or the bass itself, or
Yeah,
both of them?
well, the phrase or the subject that is
Yeah,
presented in the
the
ripieno.
melody. Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
melody and the bass.
So wait, the ripieno, is it given to you, the melody? Is that what's happening?
No, it's just but you see that so for example, in the one that I showed, pom pom
I
pom
see.
pom pom pom, you see it reappear
Yeah.
4 or 5 times. So you see, that is the theme again. I mean, what you invented in the beginning. Of course, you
So
can vary.
it invites you to use the bass line, the ripieno, to create your theme, and then with that idea, you're saying start to vary it in different keys and go places with it.
Well, at least that is what is suggested by Mattei's student here, because he says you can take a theme and then create your own trajectory. I mean, he proposes one trajectory, but you could change
Mm.
that too. And the modulations aren't fixed. You can make them up, which means also that you can exchange the modulations in one piece and use other modulations. Yeah? So for us modern users who have like computer programs with musical notation, this is super fascinating, because it means that you can use a partimento, and then you take away the modulations, you create some blind spots. There's just no notation at all, and you say, okay, go ahead and play whatever you want, but you have to get there. Right?
Yeah.
So those kind of like um, scores where you leave empty spots are, this comes very near to what Palmerini suggests here.
Well, Partimento, I mean, I think the way I view it is that bridge to free improvisation, essentially, because there's sight reading, you be a good sight reader, but then you take away the right hand, now you have left with the Partimento bass. Then take away the bass at some point, because
Yeah,
you at some point you need to be a free, which is composition, right? Because it's
yeah,
to train composers, right? The Neapolitan conservatories is to be a composer eventually.
yeah. But isn't it strange that there are almost no like there are no suggestions of how to go from the written notation to the free
Yeah.
improvisation. I mean, this is one of the very few instances that I found someone talk about this, that you can actually get away from the musical notation. But it seems to be a topic that maybe they talked about, but they didn't
Yeah.
write about it.
That's wonderful. Now, the last thing I think with the variation, would you like to speak about your article in in the Oxford Handbook of Variation, the variation counterpoint in 18th century Naples and Bologna?
Yeah, well, it's an essential element of this pedagogy, I think. From the very first pages of Durante, you see that Durante is making variations. I mean, that's the reason why he gives one cadence with the same figures from 7 different points. And every exercise is given with the same figures in a lot of different keys. I mean, that the only reason why he does that is that variations are expected, right? Otherwise, it would be silly to repeat them with the same figures, right? So variation was something that is completely yeah, it's part of the learning process, I would say, and you see that in the Bolognese tradition as well.
Now you said
It's
variation counterpoint, and this is a catch. Is this umbrella term to refer to everything?
Well, it is. This is not only specific for or characteristic for Naples and Bologna, but it's part of contrapuntal traditions in Italy and elsewhere too. Um, but for example, this old book by Spiridione, I think you
Mm. The
had that
cadence
on.
book, right?
Yeah. So that was a book from the 1670s or something like that, where you have like
Mm.
72 variations on one single cadential pattern. That's exactly the tradition from where also Durante's cadential variations come. It's the same tradition. Yeah, so and in this particular article that you showed here, which is part of a new handbook that is going to appear in December, I think.
Mm.
It's called Oxford Handbook of Variation.
Wow.
This in this chapter, I speak for the first time about Nicola Porpora's um, counterpoint method. And Porpora is very interesting. I'm going to transcribe a lot of this stuff in a new edition, which will come next year. But what Porpora does is he uses solfeggi in his contrapuntal teaching, and he starts with giving the solfeggio, and then he lets the student write uh, new bases to the solfeggio. So can you exchange the bass line with something else? And they have to write maybe 7 or 8 different versions of the bass. And they do that maybe a few months or 3 months or 4 months. And then they change, then they get new solfeggi, and then they have to write to exchange the melodies. So they preserve the bass, but they have to write 7 or 8 different versions of the melodies. Also, short phrases like Mattei, very short pieces of 5, 6 bars only. It's just one line, but super interesting because it's all so short that you can memorize it, and you can sit at the keyboard and like invent um, alternative ways to play a melody or a bass.
So
Yeah,
that's
so
come. That's coming out. When is that coming out?
in December, so
Okay, pretty
the
soon.
book is practically ready. It just has to be printed.
Wow. So that's an action-packed update. We've got a lot of stuff there. I wanted to just, I like to throw curveballs at the audience. I mean, at the guest. And I know that, Peter, that you are known for being the Partimento expert and the 18th century expert and this period. But the thing is, I know you, and I know that you have very wide interests in music beyond this as well, more modern tastes as well. You listen to other things. Um, you know, let's talk as teachers for your students. It's very interesting that, we see the benefit of this thinking this way, but the language, of course, is rooted in the 18th century. It's rooted in, and you could say, the early 19th century. The
Yeah.
question is, of course, can this be useful with the whole soundscape changing in the 20th century, the 19th century, you know romantic and everything? Can this thinking, partimento thinking, not specifically the exact way of what is created, um, before all of this, before you got into partimento, I'm sure you also were familiar with modern styles and everything, and you still are, and you do. I'm sure you do listen.
Yeah.
So for a modern student, like, how would you say this translates the thinking? I think, was it Professor Sanguinetti or Professor Yergin was talking about, was it Beria? There was an atonal composer who did Fenaroli, and there was, of course, Debussy did Partimento himself. I mean, maybe by a different name or something. So how does this form the mind for a modern student today? We want young children to do this, and of course to also reproduce authentic 18th century language. But also, what do you see for other sound as well, other sound templates?
Yeah, so the transfer from these kind of skills into more modern styles, or like 19th century style, or so. Um, I think if you, especially if you see in the French theoretical treatises, you see how this continues. So of course the modulations get more spicy and so on, but these traditions continue until at least 1900 or so.
Mm.
But for me, the choice of working with partimenti is most of all a matter of efficiency. You save a lot of time because it goes a little bit faster, or quite a lot faster than if you use purely written methods. And so for us modern teachers who get their courses slimmed more and more and more, we get fewer hours per
Yeah.
course. This is super super interesting and important, because we have so little time with our students. We must think about how to be as efficient as we possibly can. And so this has driven me into Partimento. And I would be surprised if this had no effect on other styles. I think it has. But if you would ask me, okay, if you would like to compose like in nowadays musical language, would you use Partimento? Then my answer would be no. I wouldn't use Partimento.
But maybe what people are getting at is the thinking, like the thinking in a horizontal way and not thinking so vertically. The idea. I mean, you could think
Yeah, of
horizontally in a 20th century way.
course. Yeah.
So it's not so much that I'm going to follow the rule of the octave all the way to the grave, but I'm going to also think, maybe parallelism, planing, but also in a way that I can, because I think, what for me, one of the greatest things about Partimento was always just the first page was of Ferno was just telling me, these are the intervals, these are dissonances, these are consonances. And it makes me think, well, if that's my template of what a dissonance is and a consonance, and that changes later, I'm still thinking that way. We have things that I want to resolve through horizontal thinking. So it's not so much the specifics, which I do respect, and I think we should all learn, and is wonderful and should be a part of the fixed part of our education. But also thinking forward, like that, the way of the thinking, though just the way it can be used in, but in a different setting.
Well, I would say what's what I definitely would work in any style is to to use imitation and variation as a basic way of learning music, and learning music as a language, and to not go always through notation necessarily. I mean, notation can be part of it, like in Partimento. I mean, you use Partimento all the time. They have always notation in front of them, but the 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 skill to create your own music, um, is there is a lot of like imagine imagination needed too. Yeah? And it's not only problem solving, but it's also trying to to give impulses to production of music and to variation of music and invention of music. I mean, I would do that if I would try to emulate the style of Igor Stravinsky or let's say Shostakovich or any other. Um, I mean, even very modern composers. I would do that. So singing and playing is a very good thing. I mean, we kind of lost a bit of that in the 20th century. So composers who only sit and write, but the results are not always so very impressive. At least the music is played often just once or twice, and then it's never heard again. That's a little bit a pity because it takes a lot of time to compose. So it's good to find those methods that assures that the music is played maybe 50 times or at least 100 times, not once.
All right. To end off, we had a very scholarly episode. I think everyone would be satisfied on the high level of discussion here. But I think there's one thing that I always found very interesting, and this is fun. This is just fun. So I'm going to ask you, winner stays on. Okay. I'm going to mention a partimenti pedagogue or composer. I'm going to give you two. You just say the one who stays on, and he's going to winner stays on. And we're going to just go through a couple. All right. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Forno or Zingarelli? Say the one who stays on.
Zingarelli.
Zingarelli or Mattei?
Mattei.
Mattei or Fenaroli?
Mattei.
Mattei or Martini?
Mattei.
Mattei or Leo?
Leo.
Leo or Porpora?
Oh, that's a difficult one. It depends on the perspective, but I would say musically, I mean, the one that inspires me most is definitely Leo.
So Leo? Okay. And finally, Leo or Durante?
Leo.
All right.
I knew I was going to stick with Leo at the end.
So now people know. Well, the great Professor Peter Van Toor, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. And episode 200, I'm honored that you are
Oh,
200, and it's really been fantastic. So all the best to you. And I just want to announce a counterpoint panel. We did the Partimento, we did the solfeggio, but we are going to have a specific counterpoint panel, and it's going to be great. It's going to have a lot of great people on. It's going to be a lot of fun. Well,
yeah.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Nicol. It was a pleasure to be around again.